Welcome to Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield. This episode is sponsored by Mayfield Counseling Centers, helping you find clarity, hope, and purpose. Call us at 719-452-4803. Here's your host, Trever Shirin.
Thank you for joining us again, especially if you read the title of this episode before you started. This is Let's Talk About Sex, Baby. Let's talk about you and me. All the good things and the bad things that can be.
Please still listen. Please continue to listen.
This is part 4 of a continuing conversation with David Galvan, who is a great friend and a part of Education for a Lifetime here in the Springs. He gets the opportunity to go into schools and teach teenagers about sex. And so we're going to be talking about sexuality. And so if you have little ears around, be wary of that. Yes. Hopefully my song didn't put you off immediately, but we're grateful to have you here, David, to talk about this. Last week we talked about shame, specifically around pornography and expectations of what sex is, and how our parents have instilled either whatever or shame into us around sexuality, and how we can talk through that. But we wanted to kind of discuss today a little bit about sexting and appearance and self-confidence and self-image, and continue along the vein of shame. So would you mind just real quickly telling us just a little bit about how shame seeps into sexuality?
Yeah, I think it has a great opportunity to seep in because of culture and the way that we communicate in culture, but also because of families, how we've passed it down, maybe even in the culture of your family and generationally how it's been passed down. Like, grandpa, don't talk about this, talk to your mom, and even just passing it on. When a child says something, go talk to your mom about this, go talk to your dad about this. We've already created division in the family because of that. And so you're already bringing shame in those situations. And shame does seep. Shame doesn't announce itself. It seeps into the situation. It literally is like a fog, and it comes in those situations. And the fog you can see for a little while, and all of a sudden you can't see it all. And we see that. And so I think, when we talk about shame, whether it's through viewing our bodies or sexting or sexual activity, pornography, wherever that is, that covering comes in and can redirect somebody's life in a very significant way without significant help, like a Mayfield counseling or someone that's around to help out and to navigate that. And so we can talk about those types of things as we talk more today.
Yeah. Well, and I think there needs to be a distinction if we're going to go down this path today, that there's nothing about shame that is healthy. Period.
No.
Now, guilt is and can be a propellant forward of I've messed up, or something that I've made a bad decision and here are the consequences and I'm feeling guilty. Again, guilt can easily turn into shame. Right? But I think guilt is a barometer of our moral code and our values going, I messed up.
Similar to conviction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, so I want to make with our listeners be very, very clear that there is never a positive to shame. And I think guilt can be very telling of where we're at. So if we have listeners that they have a life of sex before marriage or pornography, and they're feeling the guilt around that, I'd ask them to consider, is that guilt or is that shame? Because if it's in the past, and we've worked through that, we've received forgiveness, we're moving forward, guilt shouldn't be there anymore. Right. And that's where shame can creep in, and that's where that, like you said, it's like a fog. It seeps in and creeps in, and we don't even know that we're now surrounded.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I just want to make that very clear distinction. I
think that's a really good thanks, Mark.
Because it's amazing the stories we start telling ourselves.
Yeah. It's similar to like those, and some of us will probably do this today. And so we'll just give you the trailer. But some of us, as we're listening to this podcast, will begin replaying movies of moments in our lives.
Yeah.
Things that we have adapted shame in, where we have adopted shame in our story and the story that we wrote. And especially around sexual activity. whether that's, you engage in sexual activity on a one-night stand to engaging in sexual activity with a relationship that you knew you weren't supposed to be doing that in, or even like a sexual assault or rape. These are serious things where that shame and guilt, like, things can come in. And sometimes you can take shame where it's not even like there's no logical reason, but you've taken that on so that you can have some type of reasoning to the event. And so even if someone has had that, whether that's a sexual assault or rape, like we encourage you to get the help that you needed. And so to touch on that real quick is, these are serious crimes, but it's not your fault if you've been in one of those types of situations. So we ask that you get the help that you need for that situation, so that you can work through, even as a parent, if this happened to you as a kid or whatever that may be, like, so that you can work through and even communicate sex on a healthy level to your children.
Yes, and I think in the things that are going around on the news right now about people dismissing rapes and sexual assaults and power and and those, there's whenever it's like, I appreciate you saying that it's not your fault, and receive help, because you should and you need to, and you need to work through those things, and these things are not dismissive
at all. No. So I just wanted to address that, so that even if somebody's listening, because when we talk about shame, especially around the context of sexual activity, there's so many things that could come up in somebody at that time. And so we want to make sure we address that, because we're trying to equip you as individuals that may be training your individual children, or even training other students that you may be seeing and you're listening to this, just to give that avenue to know that, hey, there's something else probably working here, and to be aware of that. And that's why we're here doing this podcast, so that people can get the help they need. In regards to shame around, let's talk sexting first.
Which may seem somewhat left field.
Right?
to what we just talked about.
And before we do that, I think for parents that are really not engaged in, and we've talked about this before, we've had David Eaton on from Access Media, culture translator, like go onto Access, their website, and download it so you can be up on these things. But for parents that are really not up on sexting, can you just do a quick overview of that?
Right. Welcome to 2018, and this is what is going on. We have seen sexting is sending of any sexually explicit image via text message, primarily through some of our social media apps. You're seeing this happening. Sexting is sending us image, everything from partial to full nudity, and it's even messages. So it's the full message of like talking about an event or their body in some sort of way.
So texting, Snapchat.
Yep.
This new Snapchat edition. Have you heard of that?
No.
There's a new Snapchat. From what I've been told, there's a new Snapchat edition, After Hours.
Okay.
Which is very pornographic and very.
I did hear about that. Yes. Yeah.
So. Well, and we talked last episode that the majority of internet use is for pornography, and so it makes sense that there are millions of ways that this can happen. And I think the big thing to hone in on is that our teens are doing this with other teens, with adults. Adults are doing it towards teens, towards each other. It even happens within marriages. It happens with extramarital affairs.
Sexting has become almost normalized as a flirtation between individuals. So this could be something that your student will face, your child will face at some point. And so the things about sexting we have to be aware of is that how we handle that situation as a parent is imperative. Shaming our child in the midst of them doing something that may not be healthy for them may not be a healthy approach. Putting shame on them to say, I cannot believe you did this. What were you thinking? And doing everything that we may have seen even as parents does not necessarily produce the outcome that you desire. And if we're all on the same page, I would assume the outcome we desire is growth, is conviction, or not remorse but repentance, a change in attitude, a change in direction of what they were doing before.
I mean, saying something like, I'm not happy with this at this moment. Could you tell me why you had thought about, really engaging them on a inquisitive level.
Yes. Right. And your tone matters in that. So a couple things to think about. Let's say that you at some point or another have found that your son or daughter or your child is producing or sending or receiving sexually explicit images. I'll pause for a moment for you to think, how would I react? what would I say? This is your training ground right now. This is your practice. So that if this does happen to you, how will you respond? You know, and I think sometimes as parents, we instantaneously take everything away, abort mission, like, get out of here, like, oh my goodness. And literally, like, everything breaks loose at that one moment.
We're going to a monastery and we're never leaving, you know.
No internet in our house, no more technology. And we pull all these things away, but all we did is removed the problem that we need to work through so that we can create the right solution. And so sometimes removing those pieces does not necessarily help to the fact to train your child to not do this over and over and over again.
For parents listening, remember our goal, our job is to create self-controlled, healthy, functioning adults.
Yes.
And so by taking all those things away, is that going to meet the need of creating a healthy, self-controlled, functioning adult?
Right. It'd be like this, and this is probably loose, but I would say it'd be like you're a kid getting into a car accident, be like, you're never driving again. Well, as you as a parent are going to drive them everywhere the rest of their lives, like, okay, we've got to figure out what are the incremental steps to reintroduce the opportunity and the privilege of driving.
Yes.
Just like it would be with sexting. Okay, maybe there's a season, a time for that to be removed while conversations are happening of incremental introduction of what that would look like. And that typically would happen on, number one, is on the early end. So what do discussions look like right now for you and your kids around social media and around sexting? Like, what did that look like on the front end? Number two, you got to look at what does it look like right now in the midst of your phones. So my little girl's 13 years old, almost 14, and we still have conversations about what she's presenting or what is she sending on her things. And I'll just ask her, hey, what are you sending? Like, what are you texting? What are you snapping? You know, and asking those questions. And so, but I've kept that dialogue open the whole time. And so even if that dialogue's not open right now, you can open that. And you can open that with your child.
So let's go to the why sext. What is it doing for us? What is it feeding? What's the purpose of sexting? Why would somebody do this?
And this is a 13-year-old anomaly. I mean, like 13 years ago, we
it's not new.
Yeah. So it's infancy as it is. If you took it and you said maybe it's like a 7th grader, you know, as long as we've seen like sexting and some of this stuff going on. If you want to go a little bit further back to MySpace, we can, but that'll be a little bit earlier.
MySpace and the Razors, baby.
Yeah, and so but a lot of this imaging stuff, I mean, you got to remember, a lot of adults in the media, we see this in media. And adults are just getting, they're getting, like, you see the consequences of some of these careers just going down the drain because of some of this. And I don't think adults even have a full grasp of what sexting is doing to our culture. And so we've got to pay attention to that. So students are watching us. Your children are watching culture when they can send that, and people got to come back and give an apology, and they think everything's okay. But some of it takes a while and time, and we don't get to see that.
And when you post something on the internet, it doesn't go away.
It is absolutely does not go away. It goes into, if you ever watch like Wreck-It Ralph, like there's a scene where like everything's in the abyss.
Yep.
Like that's where it goes. So it still can be like brought back. I tell students all the time in the classroom, they're like, sexting. And I was like, so let me ask a question publicly. You know, like once you send that image, is it public? They're like, well, yeah. I go, how many of you in this room have seen an image that was not sent to you? And I could say probably about 75 to 80% of the room will raise their hand. Yeah. And some of the students will be in shock. And it's interesting to us as parents because we probably think, oh, they should already know that. But no, they're still in shock that someone else would have seen their image. It's becoming more normalized, which is a little scary to me that, oh, yeah, I could get that. But like that image is seen by more than one person typically.
And it can follow you. I mean, I'm thinking back to the embarrassing MySpace profile pictures that I may have had as a kid. And, you know, if I searched hard enough and I knew where to go, I could absolutely find those, even though I like can't even put the image in my head.
Right.
It's out there somewhere.
It's out there somewhere.
And it will be for the rest of my life.
Right. And even if we think they're gone on our social media, or maybe they're out of our smartphone and we hit delete, or even with Snapchat, those images don't go away. And students are becoming more and more aware of that these images don't go away.
Well, I remind, if our listeners are in Colorado Springs, remember back to the Canyon City incident 2 years ago with the students in the school.
Yep.
passing around a bunch and being tried and persecuted or prosecuted as adults.
Yep.
From a child pornography piece. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, there's a lot of different things that we don't really consider.
Right. And so when you think sexting with your student, like, and they're there, like, there's a lot of things that you can talk about with them that won't create guilt and shame, but that'll create awareness. That'll create opportunities for more discussions, but then to put inside them value. I think your student wants to hear from you as a parent that you value them, not because of what they do or how they do it or what they look like, but because of who they are. And this is an opportunity now to take shame out of the picture and bring in hope, mercy, grace, forgiveness, truth, because now we don't take this sexting thing and be like, I cannot believe this is my student. I can't believe you did this. How did we raise you like this? We didn't raise you like this. And move that out there and ask questions and like, can you help me understand like why you would do this? What is it doing for you?
What do you think the consequences are?
What the consequences are? What are like? What's your expectation to the person that you sent this for? You know, what do you desire from them? What do you think other people like? Just asking questions that are not indicting, that are inviting.
It's not an interview or
an
interrogation. Interrogation.
No,
it's not even a lecture.
No, it's an invitation to their heart. It's an invitation to why they're thinking that way.
And here's what I'm going to encourage parents. This has to be the way, or should be, like if you're trying to go, I don't know how I'd even have this conversation with my kid right now because I'd be so upset. Well, let's pare it down a little bit.
Yeah.
If your kids get into a fight with each other, and how do you handle it? Do you yell and scream, or do you sit down and go, come here, let's talk? So why did you yell at your sister?
Yeah.
What was going on inside of you as you're doing this, you know, and
good.
those kinds of things, to really engage on that level so that it becomes a part of how you engage your family at home instead of the yelling or the shaming or the guilting.
Yeah.
Well, and something I'm impassioned about, and it's what's driving me into counseling, is I suspect, and just looking in my life and the lives of others around me, if someone had that conversation with me at a young age of like, hey, so what's going on here? What are you doing and why are you doing it? There's a lot that would come out that are deep core longings that are not being met. And there's a brokenness inside of me that's driving me to do this.
Right.
And as we dig a little bit further, we'll find those things. And I think it's equally scary and exciting at the same time, because I don't want to see my kid broken.
Right.
But if I'm able to see the brokenness and identify it and say, hey, I'm noticing that you have some real self-image problems. You're struggling with that really, really on a deep and impactful level, and that's driving you to do these things. Let's focus on that. Let's invest some time into the root of what's going on, rather than focusing on the actions that are coming from that brokenness.
Yeah, and put more discipline and put more of these things to remove stuff away and all of that. You know, I find myself with my little girl, I'm in a blended family, so I've got to ask a lot more questions to say, hey, what's going on and what's happening? And so even in our moments when we're face to face, like that's huge. And so I'll take opportunities where it's just her one-on-one and we're asking questions, but we're doing some type of activity typically. And even just recently where I had to ask her and say, hey, like, can you help me understand like your expectation of me going out there and you coming out here? Like, you know, at 13 years old, she's thinking about some other stuff now and friends and all this stuff. And I go, do you want me to be there all the time? Like every trip I go out there, or you come, or, you know, what's your expectation? And she kind of broke down and she goes, Daddy, I just want to see you out there. I just want you to see my life. And I go, okay, help me understand that. And she just broke down some things for me. And I go, well, do you understand why Dad can't come out there? And sometimes it's good for them to ask those questions so that you get the response back from them. And then eventually I go, well, what do you think would be, what do you think's a reasonable expectation here? Like, you want me 6 times, 7 times, 4 times, 1? What is it? She goes, Dad, if it was 1 time. Now she's part of the conversation. Now she's like, hey, I'd love for it to be one of these trips, and I'd like it to be this one. And as a blended family person, individual, as a dad, like this is something you can use with your kid and say, what are your expectations? Like, what's going on, and those types of things.
And something just clicked in my mind
Yeah.
here from our last episode when we were talking about how sex within marriage is communication. It's built
Right.
on communication. And it seems as if you're having these conversations with your kids, you are modeling for them how a relationship should be. So when they go into a marriage, rather than having false expectations from pornography, they have expectations of communication and what intimacy can look like on a healthy level.
Yep.
And so when they enter into that marriage, they're having that healthy communication, which is going to breed and to seed healthy sex.
Yes.
And I think what I'd like parents to realize too is there's probably parents listening going, well, it seems like you guys have it all together.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, we're trial and error for us. We're learning. But that's where I think there's no shame in getting some help from your faith community or your family or counseling.
Yes.
Going, I've not done this well and my kids are young, so I have some time to change, or my kids are in their teenage years and I still want to change.
Right.
Like, get some help.
Yes.
Walk through this with people.
And I totally agree. And I think that's where shame number one comes in.
Yes.
Because they're like, we got all these issues, and as individuals, we see counseling as shame. Like, oh, like something's wrong with me. Rather than, no, I want something to be better about me.
Yep.
Yeah.
I want something to be better about the context that we're currently in. So when we talk sexting, like I could tell you all the stats about sexting, but as a parent and as in regards to shame and sexting and shame and body image, the thing that we can do is this. Number one, ask questions from an invitation standpoint, not an interrogation standpoint. Number two, reinstill value. Look at your child and let them know they're valued. Look at them and let them know that they have worth and value, even in the midst of what they're currently doing right now that frustrates you, that makes you upset. Because here's what happens. Some of that upset and frustration is because you're embarrassed as a parent. And I'll tell you what, that probably is true. But as a parent, we have to navigate this stuff. And that's why resources like counseling and those types of things are so useful. You're not alone as a parent in the midst of this. Everyone's kids make decisions that we're not proud of at times. And I don't think I made every decision my parents were proud of. And I still don't think I make every decision my parents were proud of.
Yep.
But what we have to do as parents is we have to work through our stuff to show our children this is, and we could tell them, hey, I'm still working through this, but I want you to know you're valued.
That's awesome. David, once again, thanks for coming in and talking. This has been huge for me, and I really hope that it's been impactful for our listeners as well. If you're in a place where you just need to talk to somebody, reach out. There are people who want to grab hold of you and take you where you need to go.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you for joining Candid Conversations. If you would like more information, go to mayfieldcounseling.com/candid conversations and check out our Facebook page, Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield.